Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Bleach, Agent of the Shinigami Arc, Episode 14, Back to Back, A Fight to the Death. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary or reminder of exactly what happens within this episode. So we start the episode with Rukia informing Ichigo about why Ishida is fighting him, assuming it has to do with the extinction incident 200 years previously. Ichigo then runs over to Ishida to basically say, "This is stupid, we are overrun, let's fight back to back and defeat all the little hollows together." Ishida tells him a bit of his backstory about how his sensei had tried to reach out and work with the Shinigami, but the Shinigami rebuffed him at every turn, and in the end he ended up facing a group of like 5 hollows, which he wasn't able to defeat on his own while Ishida was watching, and ended up dying to that hollow attack because the Shinigami didn't bother to show up for over 2 hours later, which was too long. And Ishida felt that they did that on purpose because they didn't like his sensei. And ultimately, though, after hearing this story from Ishida, Ichigo basically says, "So what you were saying is that your sensei didn't hate Shinigami, but had wanted to work together with Shinigami, and now we have to work together here because we don't want to see people we love keep dying to hollows," and tells Ishida about his mother and how he doesn't want to see anyone be sad from their loved one being taken by a hollow, which ends up kind of corresponding to what Ishida's sensei had also said, which leads Ishida to basically be open to teamwork with Ichigo and work together with him, even though he is a Shinigami. And lucky for them, Urahara and his shop assistants show up and are able to take over the small hollows because a new hollow appears and the sky splits apart, and out comes what is a Menos Grande, which is a gigantic hollow that is believed to be a culmination or combination of like hundreds of hollows all piling on together to create a new gigantic version of themselves. Some comedic fighting ensues where while they try to deal with this Menos Grande, and we learn that Ichigo's power is much stronger than anybody thought, because Ishida realizes that Ichigo has no idea how to control his spiritual power, which leads him to the conclusion that he's not been using his power, and yet the strong spiritual power that he has is him in off mode. And when the Menos Grande uses a Sero attack on them, Ichigo blocks it, and this unleashes his full spiritual power potential, and it actually wounds the Menos Grande enough that it retreats back into Hectomundo, and this leaves us, of course, with an out of control Ichigo because he's never learned to use his power, and now his power is on full blast, and he can't really handle it, and he's laying on the ground. His sword is oh my god, why do I forget the name of them? Anyways, his sword, because I've forgotten the actual name of it, is Zanpakuto? I think that might be it. I'm unsure. But anyways, his sword is distorting with how much pressure he's releasing. So Ishida, who had previously realized that he could absorb Ichigo's strong spiritual powers to increase his own, basically steps on the sword, starts absorbing Ichigo's excess power, and then shooting it off with arrows into the sky to kind of alleviate it, and eventually gets it down to a more manageable level, which is then when the episode ends, once everything has calmed down. While all this fighting is going on, Urahara is stopping Rukia from interfering because he wants Ichigo's power to be unlocked. And then we have Shad and Inoue, who are on a bridge a little ways away with a clear view of what's happening, watching so that they can then decide for their future as well. And that is the episode in a nutshell. And now that we know what happens within the episode, it's time to rank the episode on our two ranking lists. We rank on our mostly objective ranking list and then on the personal ranking list. So we'll start with our mostly objective rank values, and we'll start on the positive side. I've highlighted those I felt applied to the episode. So we start with our multi-arc supporting character development, which is where we learn that Urahara can use the Bakudo spells that Shinigami use, which heightens his mysteriousness. You know, if the hat covering and shading his eyes wasn't enough to let us know that he is mysterious, we now know he is even more so because he can use Shinigami spells and Bakudo, and he uses this to bind Rukia so that she cannot interfere with Ishida and Ichigo's fight. This is worth 3 points. We then add 4 points for our multi-arc main character development, which is that Ishida reveals how his sensei died in front of him from a hollow attack because of the Shinigami not arriving for 2 hours after he died, until like 2 hours after he had died, and he believed that they had done this out of malicious intent because they did not like his sensei, and his sensei's reaching out to try to work together to combine their powers, so on and so forth. And Ishida, who witnessed this, obviously held the grudge. But then we also get our multi-arc main character growth, which basically is kind of resolving that development. So we have Ichigo saying that they should fight the Hollows together, which aligns to his sensei's ultimate wishes, which was that he wanted to work with the Shinigami and combine their powers. And this allows Ishida to then acknowledge the need for them to work together and that teamwork would be necessary, especially in this particular scenario. And he does agree to fight back to back with them. Then, when Ichigo defeats the Menos by unlocking his spiritual power in full, which is a development for Ichigo, that he's unable to control, Ishido then absorbs it and releases it in arrows in order to help him. And as he's doing so, he kind of starts to realize that part of his grudge towards the Shinigami for coming late was actually his way of coping with the fact that at that time he wasn't able to step up and help his sensei. He could only stand there and watch as he fought and died because he did not yet have the skills in order to assist his sensei. But as he is assisting Ichigo, he's kind of starting to come past that. So a lot of growth for both characters, I would say. That's 4 points. And then we, of course, have the world building. And honestly, for me, this is worth double points because there's two major world building components that take place. First off, we've basically come in at the end of the conversation several times about this whole Quincy versus Shinigami thing. This time they actually tell us what's happening, and we learn about the reasons for the extinction, which Ruki explains basically souls between the human world and soul society are constantly exchanging while also maintaining a balance. And the Quincy were ruining this balance because instead of the hollows being able to be purified and those souls returning to soul society as it's meant to do, they were straight up destroying it, meaning that less souls were able to go to soul society and then more kept coming into the human world, and this was destroying the balance, which would then have destroyed both worlds and ended them. Essentially, they were heading towards creating an apocalypse. And after several times trying to warn the Quincy, trying to get the Quincy to cooperate and to stop their activities and to find a better path to things, ultimately the Shinigami had to say, you know what, you're leading us to an apocalypse, you're not stopping to listen or stopping the apocalypse. We unfortunately have to deal with you now in a more aggressive manner, and they ended up making the decision to exterminate the Quincy, and that was 200 years previous. However, as we know, Ishida reveals that the 200 years ago incident wasn't what he actually had a problem with because he actually felt that the Shinigami were justified in their decision in that case because he understood that the apocalypse would be a bad thing. Not that he said it in those words, but essentially he said that they were more just than the Quincy were, so he understood that. But what he was angry about, again, was the sensei, which we've already gone over, and how he's starting to get over that by the end of the fight. So that's our first world building piece. The second world building piece is the existence of the Menos Grande, made from hundreds of hollows kind of merging into each other to become a gigantic thing, and that it has a power, a Sero, which is like extremely powerful, and it takes all of Ichigo's extremely strong spiritual pressure being awakened to be able to prevent it, which is pretty awesome. So that brings us all the way up to 19, and there's only one negative, so spoiler, it is a 10 out of 10 episode. But the one negative I felt was excess exposition, and not in that it was excess because it was repetitive, but that they info dumped so much on us, so much. And you know, up until this point, they have been very nice about giving us small chunks of information episode by episode, which I've commented on before because it affected the scoring, because it kept, you know, increasing the points of various episodes. And I feel like suddenly they've like done a 180 turnaround and decided suddenly that they are going to just dump everything all at once, and it's a lot of information. Like, as I've been going through these points, it's a lot of information that we have learned in this one episode. Two big world building pieces. We have character growth, character backstories, characters being even more mysterious than they were before. Like, there's so much. And I just felt like it was a bit excessive because, especially if this is geared towards children, that's a lot of information to take in all at once, rather than it being sprinkled throughout the episodes like it has been in the past. And they have had opportunities to kind of drop this on us ahead of time, because there were instances, like I said, where they were talking about the Quincy incident, but they had us come in at the end of the conversation rather than giving us the chance to listen to the conversation. So we could have gotten that in an earlier episode to make some of the other information that we're getting more digestible in like a smaller piece, but they didn't. They chose not to do that, which is why I decided to take the point, meaning it's 18, but again, max score is 10 out of 10, so that is this episode. Which now brings us to our arc ranking so far on our mostly objective ranking. And in first, we have The Day I Became a Shinigami, The Shinigami's Work, The Older Brother's Wish, The Younger Sister's Wish, Fight to the Death, Ichigo vs. Ichigo, June 17th, Memories in the Rain, Unbeatable Enemy, Back to Back, A Fight to the Death, is this episode, came in 7th. The reason it's in 7th is that there have been 7 10 out of 10s, and on our mostly objective ranking, if they have the same score, we're ranking in episode order. We then have Greetings from a Stuffed Lion, A Gentle Right Arm, Flower and Hollow, The Legendary Quincy, Beat the Invisible Enemy, Casual Soul Realm Assault Trip, and Cursed Parakeet in 14th. Alright, so now for my ranking of the episode. So we got a lot of information, and that information was very good. We like to get information. It expands our view of the characters, expands the depth of the characters, expands our view of the world. Love it. But like I said, it was a lot. And then, of course, there were, in the summary, I just summed it up as some comedic fighting. But when the Menos Grande first appears and Ichigo and Ishida are going to be fighting it, Ichigo's initial plan to defeat it is basically to start from the feet and cut it into pieces in order to bring the head down to his level so that he could ultimately kill it by slicing its mask, which I thought was amazing. Not in a good way, but just amazing as a plan. It was funny. It made me laugh. I enjoyed it greatly. Was a bit dumb, but still amazing. And then Ishida basically grabs onto Ichigo's sword at some point and realizes that his spiritual power is flowing from the sword into him, and gets the brilliant idea that they can defeat the Menos Grande by him absorbing Ichigo's power and creating a super arrow that will be able to then shoot into the mask of the Menos Grande and destroy it. and decides that he is going to tie Ichigo's sword to his head, which is the most funny thing I've ever seen, especially because we know how large Ichigo's sword is. So it like a unicorn guy on steroids. It's hilarious. Anyways, it was amazing too that that was his plan, especially when he gave Ichigo flack for his plan initially, and then his is that. But anyways, very comedic battle. And then of course it gets serious where, the Sero starts coming, Ichigo grabs his sword off Ishida's head, and, you know, we know from there spiritual power awakened, he defeats it, then Ishida helps him release the power. All great, all good, all fun. Obviously the Minos Grande also, when it was retreating, the way it retreated just amused me. It kind of is like using the sky and like almost like a curtain to like hide itself, like it was like hiding in behind like a shower curtain or something. And then it's got like the flowy cape that it was like trailing behind it as it like sneaks behind the sky curtain back into Hectomundo. And again, I don't think everybody would find that funny, but I found it funny because I don't know, I was likening it to a shower curtain, and also because it was like kind of half covering itself with the curtain as it was trying to like sneak in. And I was like, this is so funny. Because it was. It was very funny for me. But anyways, I love the comedic episodes. You should know my favorite so far was the funniest episode that we've had so far because it is really great to be entertained. And so overall, I liked almost everything about the episode. I just did feel like it was a questionable decision to me for them to dump so much, especially when they have been so good at gradually building up the information and adding information throughout multiple episodes. For them to just suddenly decide to like dump everything, I was like, I don't know how I feel about it. So for that reason, even though it was a really good episode, I decided it was a 9 out of 10 episode. And the reason it wasn't a 10 was because I felt like it was a bit everything all at once, you know? So that brings our arc ranking so far in our personal ranking to in first place, Casual Soul Realm Assault Trip. This episode comes in second, back to back, A Fight to the Death. We then have the older brother's wish, the younger sister's wish, Beat the Invisible Enemy, A Gentle Right Arm, The Legendary Quincy, The Shinigami's Work, Cursed Parakeet, Unbeatable Enemy, June 17th, Memories in the Rain, The Day I Became a Shinigami, Greetings from a Stuffed Lion, Flower and Hollow, and then Fight to the Death, Ichigo versus Ichigo. Which brings us now to our final segment, where we have our series ranking so far, and our mostly objective ranking so far for the season is 123 out of 200. And then on the personal side, it is 89 out of 200. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Bleach Agent of the Shinigami Arc Episode 14, back to back, A Fight to the Death. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.